Right on.
All right. Well, thank you for everybody and your patience, but I can guarantee you it'd be well worth your wait. And we're gonna just get started today. And again, my name is Frederick Douglass Dixon. I am the director of the Black Studies Center at the University of Wyoming, but I'm lifelong, born and raised in Chicago. So today what we bring to you is a very important conversation. Over the entire academic year, we have been reevaluating, reassessing, and revisiting the Negro question. The Negro question in itself reads, well, first of all, it's from the Mohawk Conference of 1890. And it reads, what should be done with the presence of the troublesome Negro for maximum exploitation? So that's the lens and the backdrop that we've been using all year. And we've tied it into many different veins of intellectual scholarly research. But today, we're going to take a look at what is perhaps the strongest movement, one of the strongest organizations in the United States history, and that's the Black Panther Party. So today we have two very worthy guests. We have Dr. Charles E. Jones, professor at the University of Cincinnati's Africana Studies Department, and he wrote a seminal book, and he'll discuss his book and how it relates to social movement historiography. And then we have none other, the incomparable, my dear brother, Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. from the Black Panther Party. I thank both of you all for being here. And it means a lot to us here at the University of Wyoming, because when you think about the University of Wyoming, I think this is an unprecedented conversation that we're having. And I think us having a Black Studies Center is to many folks ironic or oxymoronic. So we are going to get started as quickly as possible. So when I think about the legacy of the Black Panther Party, there's no one who would be more attuned and give it to us in a way that on a college campus not only should be respected, but should understand scholarship outside of the mainstream narrative. So Brother Chairman Fred Hampton Jr., when you explain to us your life and your connection to the Black Panther Party, why don't you give us some overview, some thoughts about the Black Panther Party and where they are now?
First and foremost, let me say I'm honored and humbled to be here with you, Brother Dr. Charles Jones. And also for clarity, I'm also honored and humbled to be the international chairman of the Black Panther Party Cubs. Distinguished from the Black Panther Party. We say with the Black Panther Party Cubs, I know a lot of people hear that term and say, well, does that mean they're young? No, one of our mantras is that we are the great grandchildren of Garvey, offspring of Malcolm, and the Cubs of Panthers. It's kind of ironic that we having this presentation today, coming up the heels of February 17th, now is the 80th birthday of Minister Dr. U.E.P. Newton, and also today, February 21st, marking what is the 57th year after the assassination of Malcolm X, L. Haj Malik Shabazz, who Minister U.E.P. Newton himself has said that the Panthers were the sons and daughters, ideological sons and daughters of Malcolm X. The Black Panther Party Cubs, we say it's a tough act to follow. We attempt to not walk in their footsteps, but their Panther Paw steps. You know, we don't. I'm a Panther Cub by birth as well, by birth and by battle. I was, born 25 days after the assassinations of 21-year-old Deputy Chairman Fred Hampton and 22-year-old Defense Captain Mark Clark, December 4th, 1969, a day in which we define as one of our September 11 stories, day in which two of our twin towers, quote unquote, fell. The day in which it was not just limited to Chicago Police Department, but part of a onslaught waged by the federal government entitled the COINTEL program, in which not at the horse's mouth, but at the pig's mouth themselves, it said that the Black Panther Party had to be destroyed by the end of 1969. I'm not just talking about rank and file representatives of the ruling class. We're talking about major players: Attorney General John Mitchell, former Attorney General John Mitchell, former Director of the FBI J. Edgar Hoover. This organization drew the ire, drew the heat. You know what I'm saying? Because a number of things, but in particular, stood up on his own terms. Stood up on his own terms. Fought for that precious entity, in which we still are fighting for, of self-determination. You know what I'm saying? The right to determine our destinies. And as Malcolm said, that, even out, to have a position of we even mount our mistakes belong to us. And that's something that people should not take for granted. A lot of people say, well, what made the Black Panther Party unique? Some people say, well, they had leather jackets. I say, well, the Hell's Angels have leather jackets. Well, they had guns. A lot of people had guns. They knew the law. A lot of people know the law. But the deal was the politics of the Panther Party. You know what I'm saying? As Minister Huey said, that everything is political. And I know a lot of us people have been trained to automatically, reference to electoral politics, you know what I'm saying, or plantation politics. But the politics, the food, clothing, and shelter, how you view it, how you receive it, you know what I'm saying, the names you reference, your definition of beauty. In fact, Minister Huey stated that we must even politicize the gun. So what made the party's gun different than the state's gun? So that dynamic, you know what I'm saying, like even how we view relationships, how we view contradictions. And not we, because again, I chair the Black Panther Party Cubs, but we attempt to walk in those policies of that organization again that suffered a military defeat, but however, ideologically won. In other words, to this day, still lives, the minds and hearts of the people still have a reverence and respect. And, so we talking about a politics that transcended geographical, gender, and generational lines. And in fact, we say the Black Panther Party legacy, protected, respected, and never neglected.
Yes, sir. And thank you for those thoughts. Dr. Charles Jones, when you think about what the chairman introduced and the historical relevancy of social movement historiography and the Black Panther Party is undeniable. But you eventually write what they call one of the seminal books on the Black Panther Party. How did it come about? What made you use that vein of research to give a story about the Black Panther Party?
Well, first I want to set the record straight is that this is not a single author book. The Black Panther Party Reconsidered is what we call an anthology or edited volume. So I have many different contributors. And in fact, there are about 17 other scholars 17 other authors, not all scholars, because some contributors were or are former members of the Black Panther Party. So in the spirit of the Black Panther Party, in many ways, this is a collective effort. And that's what's one of the hallmarks of the Black Panther Party in terms of them working together for the collective interest of Black people. But in terms of why I wrote this book and what led me to write this book, I attempted to do it in the spirit of W. Du Bois's seminal work, Black Reconstruction. And Black Reconstruction was a refuting how historians interpreted the participation of Black legislators during the Reconstruction era, in terms of showing them eating watermelon and that whole birth of the nation idea that they did more harm than good. And so Du Bois set out in a very systematic, rigorous, scholarly way to show the contributions that the Black state legislators made in terms of bringing this country closer to its democratic ideas in terms of public education for all folks, Black and whites. As a youngster from North Carolina, in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where I was raised, we did not have a Black Panther Party chapter. There was one in Winston-Salem, about 100 miles away. And youngsters of that age, 16, 17, in the late 60s, certainly always enamored with the Black Panther Party. And then as I became, as I entered graduate school, it always occurred to me that the Black Panther Party was not receiving what I call its just due, or in the language of the hip hop kids back in those days, they weren't receiving its props. Instead, they were viewed and interpreted as an anti-racist organization, an infantile leftist organization just wanted to pick up the gun and shoot people indiscriminately. As I said before, they were viewed as being anti-white, which could be further from the truth. The Black Panther Party was also portrayed as a media-created organization that, but for the guns, the leather jackets, the berets, the provocative rhetoric. There really was nothing to the Black Panther Party, which clearly erases the work and the dedication and the commitment and the sacrifice that these brothers and sisters engaged in to run numerous community survival programs there. They also often view the Black Panther Party as being a lumped-based, a gang-based organization, a political gang, no more than a political gang. But from my understanding of the Black Panther Party, those distortions, those misperceptions, those falsehoods did not coincide with my reality of the Black Panther Party. So as a graduate student, I always wrestle with this issue. In fact, not too far from Wyoming, where I earned my master's degree at the University of Idaho, I wrote my thesis on the political repression of the Black Panther Party back in 1977. And so what I tried to argue in this book is set the tone for the Black Panther Party to be considered is that this, what I call a Panther mythology, obfuscates and erases the multifaceted legacy produced by the Black Panther Party in terms of its commitment to armed resistance, as Chairman Fred Jr. just mentioned, as part of that sons and daughters of Malcolm X was picking up Malcolm X's notion by any means necessary. The idea of institutionalizing armed resistance, not the first organization to do that. We can go back to Deacons of Defense. We can go back to Mariah Stewart, who talked about the importance of having weapons. Ida B. Wells Barnett, another shero from Chicago, definitely believed in the notion of self-defense and the like. Also, that Panther mythology erases or buries the Panthers' commitment to community service, with the host of the myriad of programs that serve people throughout the country. From one of the most well-known, the Free Breakfast Program, and if you were a viable Panther chapter, that was a must to have a free breakfast program. To the free ambulance service out of North Carolina, out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where they had the free ambulance program, the 13 chapters nationwide, including Chicago, with free healthcare, right? Free medical clinics. And we still have that issue today in this country where we have 30 plus million people. We can thank the Obamacare for mitigating some of this gap in healthcare. But the Panther Party young folks had health clinics, Chicago, Kansas City, Boston, Seattle, Portland, and the like. Then it also finally, there's two more, part of his legacy was the Panther Party's commitment to self-determination of all people, which clearly contradicts this notion that still lingers in today's public imagination that the Panthers was an anti-white organization. And during the height of the Black Power organizations, one of the only organizations that talked about we need to have alliances with revolutionary people regardless of their color, and Black Power for Black people, and white power for white people. The Rainbow Coalition, right, that comes out of Chicago, led by Chairman Fred Jr.'s dad, organized by people like the late Robert E. Lee Davis out of Houston, where they organized poor white folks into that Rainbow Coalition Party in Chicago. Most Panther chapters nationwide has some version of that Rainbow Coalition, whether it was in Houston, Texas, or Denver, Colorado, or the Oakland area. So again, the interpretation how the Panthers were portrayed both in popular culture and in the scholarly literature did not mesh with the impact that I was under the impression that the Panthers made in this society. So that was the kind of my rationale for pulling together scholars and Panther members and giving them voice to put together this book, The Black Panther Party Reconsidered.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. I think that when we begin to talk about how you eloquently laid out these continuous ability to impact the Black community and beyond, Chairman Fred, what do you feel makes up for the spirit of the Black Panther Party in the height of the counterintelligence program and the rise of the Black Panther Party, exclusively looking at the role that your father had?
You know, like any struggle, any mobilization for change, contrary to what many people, subjectively or romanticized way I tend to view, whether we're talking about the American Revolution, where many people like just limited to a position that was Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty, give me death," and everyone related to that. And what the reality is what Thomas Jefferson has said the sentiments were with the American Revolution. 1/3 was for it, 1/3 was against it, and 1/3 went whichever way the wind blew. And that's the reality. And I know people like to romanticize the 60s and say, it was a time everybody was down for the struggle. Everybody came down for the movement. But again, the reality is that even in struggle, or people becoming engaged in struggle, become conscious one of three ways: inspiration, aspiration, or desperation. You know what I'm saying? And that's the reality. The deal is that you have those who are inspired to do this, and that's the reality. But you cannot negate, outside circumstances, conditions. And I talk to people, they say, "Well, man, back in the 60s we had this." I said, you can't talk about the Black Panther Party in a vacuum either. You cannot negate. People say, what made these, like at such a young age, people take such positions. You have to include also the draft. The draft, like many people in this generation not even familiar with the draft. It sounds like a foreign term. Like, what do you mean? Like, you say draft now, you think you're talking about the NBA draft. Well, I mean, it was a common contradiction where, it was a common term, go fight, go to jail to go fight. And, in fact, I think it was July of 1968 or 68, they say in parts of LA, it was the most largest draft that the government had pushed for, because they had anticipated a certain amount of resistance to be happening. So they kidnap these potential soldiers, forces who will be engaged in struggling for our people. So you have to keep all that, the draft, the Nixon dynamic, as opposed, come on the heels of a class peace era, where, former U.S. President John F. Kennedy, who was so effective with the class peace that many people's grandparents in the churches would still have, wave the fans in church with Dr. King, Robert F. Kennedy, and John F. Kennedy, same John F. Kennedy that, on his tenure, the Bay of Pigs, assassinations on Commandante Fidel Castro, same with Kennedy with the Peace Corps, so on and so forth. But Nixon came in with that raw, pulled the covers off, and under the campaign for law and order. In many cases, it forced people to come to grips with the Black Panther Party was saying. It could be correlated to even during times of Trump, he point blank said, terms like Black identity extremists, so on and so forth. So you have to keep it, one, the conditions, also, and that it was an era of, Chairman Mao Zedong said, combating liberalism. Well, no more straddling the fence, what it is, and how we view, how life was viewed, how death was viewed. And, in fact, the party had a term then, like, they view anybody to even make it to age 30. You were a super old person. It was not how people the class contradiction. Like, it was a time, as Malcolm talked about, the front of the Time Life magazine, where the young lady from, I think, China, she had a 45 against her daddy's head and said, what is he? It was translated. She was saying he betrayed the revolution. It was, you had a I've issued this term. I'm gonna use this for like a sake of argument, term great migration. I have issued that term because it kind of devalues what really, is how people being ripped off and raped and murdered from down south. Why they came to Chicago and other places. But we'll go with that term now. But you had people just settling in, up north in different places. So you had children who unlike many places where they can break the state breaks one generation and and it's passed down. Okay, this is how we do it. Because I tell you, like in prison, the orientation process, they have certain prisoners in place and they pass it down to you. This is how we are supposed to operate, so on and so forth. So you had as party would say, seize the time. It was a dynamic where, you know what I'm saying, people were just getting up north to Chicago, you know what I'm saying? You had a generation that still say, Mom and Daddy, we love you. However, you know what I'm saying, hey, we ain't cut no corners with this here, you know, it stood up. So it was a combination of dynamics.
Thank you. I wanted to get right to it with your piece, Dr. Jones, that you introduced as this scholarly literary work. When we think about how that lines up in how that work lines up with the great works in social movement historiography, what is the role of what we know now as the radicalism of the Black Panther Party in social movement historiography? Where does that become more of a story than what we know now?
Well, I see the role in terms of the lessons that the Black Panther Party has provided for us to work, towards the liberation of all oppressed people. And one that certainly stands out and resonates and should have great relevance is that in many ways, the Black Panther Party provides a model of how to deal effectively and on principled terms in a multiracial society. And soon be, some people say 2042 or so, this is going to be a majority minority country, right? And it's going to call for, unlike what we have experienced under the Trump administration, where various groups have gone into their cubbyhole, right? Where you having clashes, where you having an increase in Asian violence, where you having the continuation and the increase of Black violence and the like. The Panthers provided a model for this, right? In terms of different racial groups working for common interests. That's where the Rainbow Coalition, their very origins of the Black Panther Party, started along those models, along those lines, in terms with white leftists, with Asian Americans, with Latino Americans in the Bay Area. So I see that as a very important lesson that we can draw for. Also, the Panthers' emphasis on organizing the youth, because as Chairman Fred Jr. just mentioned, many Panthers felt that 30 years old would be, an old person. You're a veteran, right? So what do we get out of that? You saw young people take control of their life and their destiny and the destiny of their people to provide these survival programs, right? What does it take for young folks who are not in college to go out and start a medical clinic? And the Panthers in Portland had a dental clinic along with the medical clinic. In terms of the Panther School, the Oakland Community School, right, became a very important educational institution within the broader Oakland community. We see that continuation with the work that Larry Little and Sister Hazel are doing in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where they now run charter schools through that history. So again, we can learn how we can benefit and serve our community through the lessons of the Black Panther Party, again, in terms of multiracial coalition politics, raising the strong critical issues, right? Not compromising. And if we had, some people might say, a different type of Black Panther Party, you have Black Panther parties in the local areas providing a radical presence on the local level, then that organization can help keep Black politicians in check, right? Because on many local levels and state level, where's the counterbalance to Black politicians just solely playing the electoral politics game, right? Who holds these politicians accountable to the interests of Black people, right? That we can learn those lessons through the Black through the Black Panther Party. And of course, in terms of defending the lives of Black people, we learned from the Black Panther Party. And we're not talking about a Custer kind of thing and just necessarily shootouts with the police, but the importance of Black people to have the right to be able to defend themselves. I think these are all the lessons that have applicability to our situation in 2022.
Agreed. I'd like to get into when we talk about the 4 stages of a social movement: emergence, coalescence, bureaucratization, and decline. When you think about those 4, Chairman Fred, and we think about the emergence of the Black Panther Party as a result of student movements, and we think about the power of community colleges and how the origin of the Black Panther Party is tied to community colleges. Just for you to think about the origin and the emergence of the Black Panther Party, what do you think that needs to be discussed when we talk about 1966 and the emergence of the Black Panther Party?
Well, a number of things, but I guess I'll reiterate, since I said earlier too, like an attempt to put in context, because a lot of times we look at anything, whether it be relationships or revolution. You look back in historical context. Sometimes people play Monday morning quarterback. They look back and you'll miss certain things. You're like, okay, well, that happened because this was going on, so on and so forth. Or, people just jumped up with some leather jackets and guns. To put in context on, what was exhausted, what means were exhausted, what did people see, what were, like even today, like it's not just to have an end result, say, well, people came to this conclusion. What conditions, were rampant and still run rampant, that people came to the position that, we're drawing the line somewhere, and we demand our respect, and what attempts to people, go through the school system, the electoral politics being exhausted, so on and so forth, coming off the heels of, various U.S. imperialist wage wars, people, people seeing their parents go fight for a country and they come back and still, be degraded, so the attempt to put that in context, what drives an individual, what drives, and also not just one individual, but to be able to have Dr. Jones mentioned earlier, a collective. That's important to point out. Like this wasn't the case of a lone wolf or two. This is a organization with a platform, with a position, with a list of demands. And mind you, the attempt to put in context prior to cell phones, prior to social media, to say, our own newspaper, our communication, our words, our terms, our politics, how we viewed, how we viewed ourselves, what drove organizations. I mean, even on the relationships. In fact, we make a point like Cole and Jerry forming on Deborah Johnson, my mother. People say, well, how was that Chairman Fred's wife? This is an organization that took a position to say, we're not going to recognize that the state is attacking us, the state is an adversarial quote unquote relationship with the state on Monday, then go down there Tuesday and say, well, could you stop killing us for a minute and validate our relationships? This is an organization that in every aspect, from the positions to the relationships, did not seek out any sanctioning from the state. Deputy Minister of Health, Doc Satchel, who people to this day still talk about Vietnam. He was the Deputy Minister of Health, not because the CDC said it, Chairman Fred, not because Mayor Daley said it, on their own terms. So the attempt to, again, those climate, the view, put things in context, what contradictions was being coming out. What, in fact, the U.S. Media they themselves have said they had made some mistakes by not only letting Malcolm get certain media coverage, but also certain footage about Vietnam and other places where you seen people were able to relate, like, wait a minute, They don't. That's the definition of a political prisoner. That's the definition of, you know what I'm saying. This is the drawing correlation of that's happening to our community. You know what I'm saying. As Minister European Union drew the correlation with the police, he said, occupying army. You're able to blatantly hear about the atrocities being waged in the Philippines, Africa, Vietnam, and say that's happening in Detroit. I can relate that in Chicago, Oakland. So in many cases, you know what I'm saying, because you have to be able to take those blatant examples, blatant contradictions that are happening to other people. Because many times what happens to us, sad to say, you know what I'm saying, because Black people are viewed and treated as the Rodney Dangerfields of all races. In other words, no respect. So when you have a climate, you know what I'm saying, that where the world is watching, where the world is acknowledging these contradictions, this is wrong, you know what I'm saying, we seize the time, and then we're able to draw those correlations and say, listen, other people are fighting back and standing up, and there's a definition. This is called political prisoners. This is called prisoners of war. This is called an occupying army. And say, now, apply those definitions, those characteristics to our respective community, as well as correlate that we also must resist.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. Dr. Jones, using the same kind of model that we laid out with the 4 stages of a social movement, can you give us your thoughts on what would be events and paradigms that eventually become the emergence of the Black Panther Party?
Well, the primary events and paradigms that led to the Black Panther Party was the racial oppression of Black people. I mean, if we got to think about what was going on when the Black Panther Party had organized, right? In terms of the Southern base, the jure legal base nature of the civil rights struggle had grounded to a halt and did not have the same applicability in many of our northern urban cities. So you had the passage of legislation, but how did that alter the life chances of Black people in Oakland or even in Birmingham, Alabama, for that matter, with the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So the Black Panther Party was but one manifestation, right, of that call for a new strategy, for new tactics to address what the party called in the belly of the beast. So it is by happenstance in many different ways that we know the Black Panther Party of Oakland, California, but there were other Black Panther Party organizations elsewhere, and there were other Black Power organizations elsewhere. There were other Black people who took a different approach to those social movement problems in terms of some of the Black nationalist organizations, such as Baraka out of Newark and Cat. The Henry brothers out of Detroit, which were founding members of the Republic of New Africa. So those the social and economic conditions were found in the inability of just a legal approach to solve the problems of Black people. Because in the midst of the aftermath of the voting rights of 1965, that did not necessarily decrease what we know as police brutality, right? Rampant police brutality that's still going on today. That did not deal effectively with impoverished, undereducated institutions in the Black community serving Black people. Basically, those problems were laid out in the Black Panther Party's 10-point party platform, if you think about it, in terms of what we want. You know, we want decent housing, right? We want an end to police brutality. We want educational institutions that reflect the interests of Black people, and on and on. And the main one was what? We want to end to police brutality. The Black Panther Party in its original incarnation was what? The Black Panther Party for self-defense. So it showed that the legal formal approach to winning the equality of Black people through that process was insufficient. that led for calls for a different attempts, and one that gained traction throughout the nation was the Black Panther Party. And you think about this, as Chairman Fred Jr. talked about, there were no cell phones. We all got cell phones. You can contact people, et cetera, so forth. And yet these brothers and sisters organized a nationwide organization where folks were dedicated to and where they had discipline. Now, I have problems. You have a play with accountability, because you sometimes, everybody's always not the most principled, right? And you took advantage. Some people were taken advantage of in terms of leadership positions. So that's another lesson that I didn't mention early in my discussion, that we need to be a bit cautious with the hierarchical kind of one-man leader in our organizations. And we saw that in terms of the end of the Black Panther Party. And I know that might be a stage that you're going to get to later, because you talked about the 4 stages of the of a social movement. One is the decline of a social movement. And we would be remiss if we don't deal with that particular issue in terms of how the code of personality emerged, was sustained, and that wreaked havoc on the Black Panther Party. And not only on the Black Panther Party, but most numerous Black organizations, in terms of relying heavily on that particular leadership style, and that can be often problematic without the proper safeguards there.
I think you hit it right in the middle, shot the bullseye right in the middle. And I wanted to look at it, and you mentioned the stage 4, decline. I'd like to get right into it and think about the counterintelligence program. And Chairman Fred, you mentioned it a little earlier. You mentioned the idea of J. Edgar Hoover, and we understand some of those goals to stop the rise of a Black Messiah that can unite the radical masses. Now, you and I are both from Chicago. And for all of you all who are not from Chicago, Chicago represents and has the same fundamental pillars of corruption that many other spaces do. But what happens in Chicago, and what has been a historical backdrop of Chicago, is that there's been this dominant Irish Catholic democratic authority and rule. And when we look at Chicago during the time of the assassination of Chairman Fred Hampton, then we look at many of these aspects. But the one thing is Mayor Daley's power and his connection to this idea of what Chicago will look like, as he lays out a blueprint for continued dominance for big cities through ethnic politics. When we get into the counterintelligence program, what's one thing, Chairman Fred, or you can just elaborate on this, what do we look for from them, from the counterintelligence program, that we're seeing now today in many of these spaces, even when it includes Black Lives Matter?
Let me say this first. I won't get the wrong, incorrect narrative. The Cubs are coming. The Cubs are coming. The Black Panther Party Cubs are here. Let me say that, because I may have drawn a foregone conclusion. And that's because, something, I'm saying in all humbleness, because a lot of times people don't acknowledge when resistance is happening. This also is part of the counterinsurgency, that a lot of times people don't even acknowledge that organizing or organizations are right there until it becomes a safe subject. I use the analogy about Muhammad Ali being placed in the Wheaties box in the late 80s, before his physical death. And the interviewer asked the Wheaties cereal representative, why would you put Muhammad Ali on the box now? And a representative of Wheaties said, we do it now because he's safe. So I want to just say, because I grew up in a climate where people, I would be doing interviews, and people, saying, was the Occupy movement, the Black Panther Party. I even had to have struggles with members that was in the Black Panther Party. And I do distinguish those that were in the Black Panther Party and those that were Black Panthers. I distinguish nouns and verbs. But the people, they would say, right, you would tell them that the organization's right there, but that counterinsurgency is still such a fear, the breaking process. Many people are fearful to even acknowledge resistance until the ruling class puts a stamp of approval, and now we've sanitized it, we watered it down, we cooled it up, now you can acknowledge it. People are just It's people now who just even after the release of Judas, I know people who are scared to watch the movie Judas and the Black Messiah. So the way that we talk the counterinsurgency, it's the way that they do it, the breaking process, similar to the era of chattel slavery. When that pregnant sister ran away from the plantation, the colonialists, they didn't go out there and kill her. They brought her back in front of the masses of people, slit her stomach open, stomped that fetus to death in front of them. That broke generations. I tell people, also, people pass down punkism. They pass it down too. See, I forgot whose tenure was in South Korea. They had a policy in South Korea. I forgot under whose tenure. They would keep you for 3 generations. You think you get out of jail? You say, no. We're going to weed up out of you what's in you. So that whole, to even acknowledge the counterinsurgency, our people in particular have been terrorized to the point that we are terrorized to even acknowledge we're terrorized. The Black Panther Party, because for over 2.5 decades, we had a bill called African Anti-Terrorism Bill that puts the terrorism that happens to the OVs, not the OGs, the original victims of terrorism in the correct political context. So just like Alcoholics Anonymous say, the first step in addressing the problem is recognizing that we have a problem. Chicago in particular, the Daily Machine, which you just mentioned, is extremely Machiavellian, you know what I'm saying, with addressing this. You know what I'm saying? We talking about a city that, that bragged about, everything from having the first Black congressman, St. Dawson, up until the Obama administration attacked us, and how it works neocolonialism. You know what I'm saying? It's like no other. You know what I'm saying? It's a microcosm of America, but it's phenomenal how it works it. And it should be noted that there were Negro pigs that came along with this assassination of Chairman Fred and Defense Captain Mark Clark. You know what I'm saying? So, and there are Negroes who also benefited of the assassination of Chairman Fred. You feel what I'm saying? So this needs to be put in context, and again, just to even acknowledge the counterinsurgency. I'm not talking about just in an abstract theoretical way. The tangible, this comes in such nasty forms. I'm talking about people with, we've had to battle with the legacy of the Chairman Fred of the Black Panther Party, not just with the usual suspects, not just with the Uncle Sams, but the Sambos, people who, quote unquote, family members, people who were in the party. You know what I'm saying? You'll be some, I tell people, and I gotta be real careful with it, because that Jack Nicholson said in that movie, A Few Good Men, can't handle the truth. A lot of people they don't even want to know it. It's because it's colonialism, neocolonialism is ugly. It gets in, and it'll be, a lot of people would like to approach it from a race nationalism point of view. Just say white man, black man. But the deal is, a lot of people was even fighting against even any form of representation of William O'Neill being in the movie. We won't talk about that part. I tell people, you cannot talk about the Black Panther Party without acknowledging the counterinsurgency, the agent provocateurs in a relationship. You know what I'm saying? You have to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know what I'm saying? There were contradictions within the party, but the pros outweighed the cons. And to put it in this, again, a lot of people do not want to acknowledge this. So, but the Black Panther Party, they was upfront about it. They was clear. They said, man, we know we've been infiltrated. The Black Panther Party Cubs, there have been assassination attempts on my life. They've been agent provocateurs at us. I mean, you name it. And this is part of the counterinsurgency. And a lot of people would like to dismiss it as some abstract boogeyman or just mistakes people made. We can't, on one hand, acknowledge that the FBI they tapped my grandparents' telephone when he was 13, 14 years old. 13, 14 years old. He took the junior NAACP from 7 to about 300 members in 7.5 month time period. You know what I'm saying? Deputy chairman, age of 19 years old. Well, on the other end of that spectrum, you look at the age range of William O'Neill. He has children in Chicago right now. You know what I'm saying? So we must acknowledge that a lot of people have told me, well, all I know about is this. Edward V. Hanyahan was a state's attorney, Cook County state's attorney, up under Mayor Daley. We mandate, people were scared. We went to his funeral. People were scared. People telling I got a group of guys who I refer to as my Plan B guys. They're more reactionary. I was Chicago real big about structure. I'm my Plan C guys. They were so reactionary. They didn't know who Edward V. Hanyahan was. People were telling them, stay away from Chairman Fred. Don't go there. We went to go pay our disrespects. This funeral. We went to James Gloves Davis' funeral, paid our disrespects. You know what I'm saying? We went there, and people say, well, we shouldn't talk about that part. You must acknowledge the good, the bad, and the ugly. Betrayal, all that come with it. You know what I'm saying? You cannot, if you don't know who William O'Neill was, you know who Cook County State Attorney L.V. Hanyon was, you know who Chairman Fred was. So we got to come with objective analysis.
I think that's absolutely correct. When we think about how the narrative is constructed to be marginalized, and right, as you say, now it's sanitized to the point where it's big business to have this movie become part of the narrative, and actually it leads the narrative. So having this conversation is very important. But I think when you talk about James Gloves Davis, there was at one time a video of you being there.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden it was no longer.
Took it off YouTube. It was, they had the actual footage. They had the footage of us at his funeral.
I saw it.
Police pulled me over 2 days later, surrounded the vehicle, and told me that was messed up what you did at his funeral. I said, that was messed up what he did December 4th, 1969. The pictures of L.V. Hanyon funeral, they took that down. It's similar to when you watch a lot of these documentaries about our people. You look in the, you're like, damn, was everybody softballs? They do not want you to show you any signs of resistance. I tell people, when they show you the TV show Cops, I said, you don't think somebody got away? When they show you 48 hours, you know what I'm saying? Everybody not stool pigeon, but they cannot show you that. In fact, it's a tactic in India. When they train the elephants in India, if any elephant sees the trainer step on the cup, and that elephant step on the cup, they have to kill that elephant or transfer that elephant. Because once that elephant sees what's, you say, wait a minute. He go back and say, hold on, man. This dude don't weigh nothing compared to me. There's no way possible he's supposed to be in control of us. So it's intentional. Why you think I'll be doing interviews? I can tell people I'm the chairman of the Black Panther Party because they'll write it up as Black Lives Matter or some other group. There's some other group that's more palatable. They do, because once if you say, wait a minute, this man, you mean to tell me man, they still fighting his biological son, who was at the assassination, still carrying this on. You know what I'm saying? You mean they're in the same house Chairman Fred grew up in? It can become contagious. It's inspiring. So the breaking process is to never show you any resistance. They'll pick out one situation and say, you know, like it's an aberration. There were places in the South that the Ku Klux Klan never went to. Many people think the Klan would just run around, throw their sheets on, and just get on everybody. There are parts down the Klan. Klan say, oh, hold on, back up, Jack. Man, we ain't going down there. And people need to understand that. Now, I mind you, some people are cool, because you have, like, what's the book, Black Confederates? Well, some people was escaping, going back down south. Going back down south. But it's like the deal is there's a balance also. There is some resistance out here. And there is some resistance right now. And I know a lot of people gonna wait till we dead and gone to say, oh yeah, we knew about that. But there's resistance out here.
I agree. I think that whole idea of what Dr. Charles Jones talked about a little bit earlier about the armed self-defense movement within the civil rights movement. It's absolutely important that that is told. But I want to take time right now to invite everybody who's here as we wrap up for you to forward your questions and comments. Now, just imagine this conversation as it's been enlightening, as we have been getting to the core of what we call esoteric information. We want you to join in. We want you to ask questions to both of these Black men on the issues about the legacy and the future of not just social movements and not just the way that the Black Panther Party is represented, but the idea of how the narrative is crafted, who controls the narrative, the power dynamic of the narrative. And I think we've done a good job. So, Dr. Jones, as we move forward, what is it that we need to make sure that in this time frame that we mentioned, that we get to the core about the Black Panther Party?
Well, again, I would like for folks to have an understanding of the very rich legacy that the Black Panther Party left in our country, and it still has today, in terms of it being an organization that advocated the self-determination of all people. Like one of the first groups, as early as 1970, when Huey Newton proclaimed that perhaps the most oppressed group in the world are homosexuals. Now, and homosexuals are still being denied rights today, and they still have to deal with forms of hate, violence, and the like. but they've definitely come a long way since 1970s, right? When Ben Chavis in the 90s, when he was head of the NAACP and he participated in that annual major march, gay march in DC, he took a lot of flack. But Huey was saying, hey, you can't oppress. Oppression is bad regardless of the source of oppression. And the Panthers always had solidarity with oppressed people. And again, I think that's one of the most important lessons that we can learn from the party. We can also learn realize the fact that the Black Panther Party, as Chairman Fred talked about in one of his notions, the way talked about the importance of inspiration, right? How the party has served as a model of political action for oppressed groups, not only in the United States, the Young Patriot Party, the White Panther Party out of Michigan, hell, even a more sanitized version, the Gray Panthers, which was dealing with senior citizens' rights. But why did they take the Panther symbol? Yeah, and internationally, well, you can go to India today in the group at the bottom of the totem pole in that caste system, the untouchables that the late Mother Teresa served, the Dalit Panthers, right? They took that title, that symbol on, and this is a very rich mythological culture. So they have many indigenous symbols and whatnot in their culture, yet they went to America and named their organizations after the Black Panther Party, right? In Israel, they had a Black Panther Party. In England. So the party helped to serve as a model of the best way of doing things. And yet and again, we also have to learn from some of the missteps that the Panthers made. Now, we talk about that, it's a very important legacy, but we have to admit there were missteps. There was too much internal violence within the Black Panther Party, from comrade to comrade. And that was an eye-opener for me as I did my research as a young kid coming out of North Carolina, looking at the Black Panther Party from afar, but then you start digging in and doing research, and you're finding out some stories about the misuse and the abuse of power. And there's no way that we can get around that to the audience. And we look at people like a Alice Rackley. And all of that we can't blame on COINTELPRO. Yes? And if we continue to just put all of the missteps at the party at the feet of COINTELPRO, then we're not going to advance as a people. Then we're going to be more susceptible of continuing to making those same mistakes there. So that would be my comment.
Okay, thank you. I want to go to a question. Can you talk about the multiple roles of women in the Black Panther Party and their roles in carrying on the legacy and the work of the organization? Chairman Fred, your thoughts?
It's important to put to define. A lot of people are coming with like, let's have an issue with structure. And I say I come up in a city that not only is the most one of the most, if not the most segregated city, but structure is as we have a saying, structure identifies state stuff and stuff. I'm kind of being liberal with my words, but structure identifies state stuff and stops a lot of bulls, like the trivial problems. That's some structure. And a lot of people have an issue with structure until the state says. In other words, if it's state sanctioned, it's okay, we respect that. That's official. This was an organization that you put in context of time, a time when people didn't even know if Pat Nixon, Richard Nixon's former U.S. President Richard Nixon, if his wife Pat was even able to, like, literally, they didn't know she could speak or not. They didn't know she was capable of even able to speak. You talk about a time, you know what I'm saying, with Leave It to Beaver, come on the heels of Leave It to Beaver TV shows, revolutionary leaps and bounds. Yes, there were contradictions, but again, when I mentioned my mother, this was Chairman Fred, this man, comrade. Also, she covered down with Chairman Fred. There were women in leadership positions. There are revolutionary leaps and bounds, and you know what I'm saying. So it's important to put stuff in context, and also with that added heat. You know what I'm saying. That I can't. negate that whole dynamic of COINTEL program, you know what I'm saying? The trickle down impact of that. But you put in context, like we talk about music or clothing, you gotta say, wait a minute, what period of time you talk about? So I use this analogy, I told IT one time, I say, I have a lot of issues with stuff you say. One thing he said on our City Hall show, they put up a picture of him one time and people started laughing at what he had on, his clothes. And he said, what were y'all wearing around that particular time? So you put it in context of that time frame we're looking at, there are revolutionary leaps and bounds. They made so many contradictions, in particular that of the gender contradiction.
Offer that same question to you, Dr. Jones.
Oh, no, definitely, most definitely, because that's another aspect of another distortion, if you will, that adds to that Panther mythology, that the Black Panther Party was an inherent misogynist organization, right? Clearly, there were some gender issues in the Black Panther Party because there were gender issues in the larger society. But as Chairman Hampton Jr. mentioned, for the context, what organization, Black Power, white leftists, the Black Church, civil rights organization, with the exception of maybe Mary McLeod Bethune's organization, had that space where women could lead and direct and serve as models than the Black Panther Party. And we can talk about that nationwide. We can look in Boston with Sister Audrey Jones there, with Chicago with sisters like Lynn French and Sister Yvonne, and you can go down the road. Sister Betty Powell out of New Orleans, who still has a bullet in her from a raid a day after the Revolutionary People Constitutional Convention, where police officers dressed as mailmen and as priests, and she was on guard duty. She was on guard duty, and I spoke and have interviewed a Black police officer who was in charge of intelligence for New Orleans to infiltrate and break Black organizations down. And he tells me how Betty Powell organized when she was arrested. And he had much respect for her because how she organized folks in prison and she wouldn't budge, right? So the Black Panther Party was an organization that provided the space. And indeed, from what, 74, 77, when Huey was in prison, the Black Panther Party nationally was led by, at that time, was Chairman Elaine Brown. And no other organization back there could say that in 1974. The NAACP couldn't say it. SELC couldn't say it, right? The white left couldn't say it. Who can say that? But yet you still have scholars to say that the Black Panther Party was inherently. And who did they interview? Hardly anyone. That's one of the contributions of the Black Panther Party reconsiders, that we provided a book that was grounded in serious, rigorous scholarly analysis, where we went out and interviewed the sources. And I've interviewed Panthers throughout my academic career as the work that I'm doing. We've done serious archival work. We have data from the organizational meetings, and that shows like nationwide the role of women. Now, some of that gets overplayed, and you talk about the narrative, right? Whereas if you wait a little longer, before about another 5 years, you will have in some writings where the Black Panther Party was majority women, because it's gone already from 1/2 I've read, and I've even read some scholars said it was 2/3, and maybe before my time is going, it's going to be all women's organization. So we can go the opposite way of that as well there. But clearly there's some very strong, powerful women in the Black Panther Party who are still organizing today. And we didn't even mention the national ones like a Kathleen Cleaver or Erica Huggins or Phyllis Jackson and on and on. You can go to every chapter across the country, and if it was a viable chapter, you had very strong women in the Black Panther Party because they provided space. There was nothing formally in the Black Panther Party that denied the participation of women. Now, how that carried out might be problematic, but it was not ingrained in the organizational ideology, a doctrine of the Black Panther Party, because indeed they all saw themselves as comrades, even though at times there were missteps. But they do provide more of a model for that progression than one that perpetuates the idea of patriarchy and misogyny. And I think the Black Panther Party gets a very, very bad rep on that particular narrative.
Thank you. As we wrap up, very enlightening conversation that I understood would bring about and evoke further conversation, stretch the mainstream narrative, and become part of this intentional way of looking and giving a view of the Black Panther Party. So as we close down, closing comments, we go to you, Chairman Fred.
Thank you. Now, thank you, Dr. Charles Jones, my brother. I miss you in Chicago, man. Respect to you. Thank you.
Sir.
Thank all those who came in on the chat. Thank the people who are honored and humbled to serve. And definitely thank those. Gotta say shout out and thanks to that organization which we have this dialogue about. The legacy of the Black Panther Party. You say protected, respected, never neglected. And again, I'm honored to not walk in, not just in their footsteps, but their Panther Paul steps. And again, appreciate this conversation, good dialogue, good discussion. Right on. And we say free them all. I got to give our mantra out. Our position, keep the names and cases, other Sunday out of Cody's, the Mumiabu Jamals, Shelson Q. McGee, the countless of those who are held captive in these concentration camps. Keep them on your minds and hearts. We say free. We say one prisoner, one contact. Again, we say free them all. Prisoners, as the party position was and is, prisoners of microcosm of the outside community. So again, not forget those who are held captive behind enemy lines. Free them all.
Yes, sir. Dr. Jones, if you could give us your thoughts as
first of all,
I'd
like to thank you, Dr. Dixon, and we sound like we had an HBCU with the doctors and whatnot. But Charles,
yeah, but we got the chairman here, so that makes everything right.
But at any rate, on the serious side, I
Yes,
definitely appreciate the opportunity, and I'm honored to share my research and my thoughts with the University of Wyoming community. I'm very pleased that they give you that space to have these kind of conversations, and to also be on this panel with Chairman Fred Jr. because I mean, like his dad and his mom, they were there. That's some powerful stuff, man. There, and I'm just going to simply echo, and I appreciate how he ended on the importance of political prisoners, right? Because we can have these conversations and we can celebrate Black history, but we need to be more vigilant on a daily and on a monthly basis with our soldiers who are in prison today for the activism that we talked about tonight. Like one of the projects I'm working on now is the brothers out of Omaha, Nebraska. The late brother Mondo and Ed Pondexter now, who were arrested in 1970 for a bombing of a police officer, that even politicians will later on come and say, look, this is shaky here. These brothers didn't do this. They were on Amnesty International. Like the evidence is very, very flimsy. Yet in 2016, 17, Mondo died in prison in Omaha, being arrested in August of 1970. Ed Poindexter, right, is still in prison now, losing his sight, having issues with diabetes and the like. And brother Fred Jr. mentions some of the East Coast Panthers who were there. And I call these brothers unforgotten comrades, because we know about some, but we don't know about all. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to continue that legacy and to make sure that folks can step forward in the future, is that we have their back and support. So I say all power to the Black Panther Party. and don't forget our political prisoners. But thank you very much for the opportunity to share my research.
Well, I want to thank you both. And I think you both have grown to understand that for us to have this space, it's incumbent upon us to leave this behind for future conversations. And I say this to all you, to both of you all, I thank you so much for all the love over all the times, and every time that we've had an issue, when I've reached out to either one, it's been the same answer all the time. So I can't thank you all enough. And I mean that in a way that I like to make sure that it is documented and understood. So when we think about the Negro question and having these conversations that expand the mainstream narrative, I think we have done it again with the idea of injecting the Black Panther Party in a much different way than what happens during Black History Month and any other month. And to have these two voices was needed and much what you call represented in a very dynamic way. So I thank everybody for coming out and your comments and your concerns and your thoughts. And we will meet you next week when we have a conversation about 16 shots in the cover-up, the assassination of Laquan McDonald, something that you know about very much so, Chairman Fred. So we're going to get to that conversation, and we're going to introduce a young man's case, Lamar Cooper, which will be very interesting. But it shows the corruption around Chicago police. And if you think about one of the things that came from Laquan McDonald's assassination is this evaluation from the Department of Justice, and that title reads, Chicago Police as Corrupt as You Thought They Were. We will get to that next week. So we thank everybody for coming out. And again, very interesting, very well put together. Thank you all so very much. All right. You guys hold on a second.
Yes, sir.
Stop that.